Welcome to Before, During, After, a Smirk Experience podcast about performance from the inside. Every week, I'll sit down with a professional comedian to unpack how they prepare for a gig, what they're thinking about while they're on stage, and how they reflect once it's over. Because great performances don't just happen, they're built. This week's guest is Matt Price, who's a proud Cornishman, a great comic, and a top bloke. Matt and me discuss how he found his comedy voice, how he handles hecklers while he's up there, and an awesome tip for people that don't like the sound of their own voice. Plus, what life lessons comedy has taught him. Enjoy. I've been wanting to get you on for a while, Matt, because your material always feels very real. How do you decide what goes in and what doesn't?
Do you know, without sounding too flippant, it's just a question of, I think the audience dictate who you are as a performer. And so over the year, I don't know how you feel about that, but they do. So basically, it's very simple. If they laugh, I'll do it again, only better. And that is it. I try it. I generally stumble my way through new material. I'm sort of quite flat and quite monotone when I do it sometimes. Occasionally, I might even get a piece of paper out and go, "Oh yeah, I was writing my diary yesterday. Like porcupines, what's that all about?" I'll do that. But basically, I just sort of try it and then try it again and keep doing it if it works, and then stop doing it if it doesn't. And that's
The,
it.
the audience definitely decide. Comics call it finding their voice, don't they? What fits and works for them. Have you
Yeah.
tried like other personas or sort of stage,
Yes.
characters or something?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Go on, talk us through a bit of the sort of trial and error that's involved in that.
Okay. Well, I would bet you every penny I have, which isn't much, that you wouldn't possibly guess what my first joke was about. Because they say talk about what you know.
Go on, think of something that would be absolutely child murder.
How did you know that? That is so clever. You Darren Browned me then. That's amazing. How did you know that that's what it was? That's extraordinary.
Well, I've worked with you enough to know your act, and all I did was think of something that would be the antithesis of what I would normally expect from you. What was
Yeah.
it?
No, do you know, it was actually Japanese suicide,
Yeah,
is what it was.
I was in the right
Yeah,
ballpark.
you were in the right ballpark. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
would never, I will say to anybody listening or watching, I wouldn't make a joke about child murder. There's limits
No,
as to
no,
what you
definitely.
can do, and there is for me. And also that gets back to the audience deciding on who you are. The audience don't want me to be too angry. I'm a serious enough looking guy as it is. What they
Mm.
like, if I listen back to every recording, so what they like is the sort of playful guy, the big, not slightly scary, slightly in charge, but playful guy who's a bit self-deprecating, a little bit dopey. My opening line of late has been, "Oh, I don't look as though I can do this," and I'm fine. I lean into that. I
That's a
embrace the
brilliant one.
fact. I embrace the fact that I don't look or sound like a traditional "Hey guys," and there's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with
right.
being that. You
No,
have
there's
to
not.
be what suits you. But I listen. So finding your voice, you find it. But for me, I only found it when I started listening to what the audience are about, and it is very much trial and error. As you know, it's like public trial almost.
Yeah.
I mean, if plumbers had to go through what we go through, how many radiators would get fixed if you think about it, right?
Yeah,
If
right.
if you had to, "Oh, I'm making a right mess of that, mate. I know a geezer who can do it so much better than that." My mate, right? He's got a proper spanner. He knows exactly what he's doing, right? And he can do a toilet in the same day for half the price, mate. You're a loser. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we have to
Well,
put up with all that. So they do sort of shape. You're shaped as you by the audience as you go.
yeah, that is. It's so interesting what you said about being a serious looking bloke as well.
Yeah.
I think so much of it, well, in business they call it personal branding, but it's basically kind of self-awareness, thinking, okay, I look like this.
Mm.
Therefore, the audience will be thinking that. Therefore, if I say this, that will counter their for blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it is, but also you never quite know what they see either or what they're thinking. We learned that as you go as well. You never quite know sometimes. I mean, I'm always drawn to, as I think we all are to a certain extent, the one person who doesn't appear to be enjoying it, and they'll come afterwards and they'll go, oh, that was just amazing. Especially Scottish men tend to do that as well. Because my
Yeah.
wife's Scottish, and Scottish men will go, oh, it's brilliant, mate. I laughed all night long. And you're like, well, you didn't show me at all. Oh, it's brilliant. No, I'm going to come back. Come on, sit at the back next time, mate, because I wanted to top myself halfway through the performance.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, sorry, I got off on a tangent, didn't mean to,
No,
mate.
no, 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 no.
But yeah, I've tried all sorts of stuff because you kind of have to. So I've done the sort of ranting and raving, and I've done the sort of deadpan one-liner guy as well, and
Yeah.
none of that really worked. And it would be, I was going for a few years. I tell you, the turning point was 2009. My wife said to me, "Why are you so aggressive on stage?" I wasn't nasty, but I said, "Well, because I'm self-conscious and I like to get in there first. And before they get me." And she said, "No, you're missing the trick there." She said, "You're a genuinely nice man." She said,
Right.
"Why don't you try doing that? Why don't you be nice to the audience? Because then it gives you options. If your default mode is being nice, then when daddy has to spank,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
cannot believe I said that on your podcast. Edit that bit out. No, don't keep it in. But you know what I mean.
I do know. No, yeah.
No, no,
I
no.
know.
But when you have to, like, when you then top
Yeah.
it, no, when you have to then be more authoritative, whatever the term is,
Mm.
then suddenly it's more acceptable because you're just more of a rounded persona and rounded personality, and you have to be believable. And you'll know this yourself. How many times have you seen somebody and they go, "Oh, so I'm terrible in relationships. I can't get a girlfriend or a boyfriend," and you're like, I'm looking at them from the back room. I'm thinking, you are the best looking person in this room, right? With your
Mm.
symmetrical features, telling the world, oh, it's because you have to dig a little bit deeper in order to make it believable. And sometimes you can be too believable. Sometimes it can be too raw, and your vulnerability can be too much. So I like to pay attention to what the audience is telling me, and I listen back to every recording as I go. And right now I'm coming into my prime as a comedian, so because I know exactly who I am and what I'm able to do and what I'm also not able to do, and also I'm very much aware when it's going wrong, but that's okay as well. There's ways of dealing with that.
Yeah, of course there are, which we will definitely talk about. Do you do preparation to make what you do on stage look spontaneous?
Not really. I've just got a good memory. And also, in terms of sort of ad lib, if you mean like improvisation, there's only it's a bit like an algorithm or a recipe, really. That there's only X amount of ways it can go. Someone either heckles you because they like you, heckles you because they don't like you. People very rarely heckle, through indifference.
Right.
So they might be encouraging you, they might be trying to discourage you. It's very rare
Mm.
that someone goes, well, I don't know, I can't really be bothered either way. They don't. They just sit there scowling. Sometimes they're talking to each other, going, "Oh, I do that," or "I believe this," or "I wonder what he meant by that." But I've got my own ability, I suppose, to try and to speak to people. So I wouldn't say that I prepare. I know that there's only X amount of things in my head that can come back. And also I'm quite lucky because I see the options in front of me. So when someone heckles, it's sort of almost happening in slow motion. I mean, you know yourself, when you're on stage, it's an altered state of consciousness. 20 minutes can seem like 20 years when it's hard. But also
Mm.
I do, but for me, time slows down a little bit, it's skewed. And when people interact, I will sometimes say, okay, time out for a second. You hold that thought, mate, and I'm going to come to you and then back to you in a minute because I've got stuff lined up in front of me. So it's a mixture. I would say that I see the comebacks in front of me. Of course, I'm going to, if I've ad libbed something before, I'm going to ad lib it again. But it's a question of like plucking it out and putting it in, as it were. And I think for me, my goal, because people used to say I was a storyteller, well, I kind of am, but my ideal goal is to tell a story with jokes in it as well and with laughs in it and to be as consistently funny and tight as possible. But also, the magic happens when you have the narrative of the room. When you've got the characters in the room, and if you can blend the two together, then it looks like
Yeah.
genuine magic. So if I've spoken to a guy called Steve who's lonely, and I'm doing a story about loneliness, I can go, "You understand this, don't you, Steve? This is all about me and you, mate." And
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
suddenly it looks like magic. So I'm very much trying to, prepare things so that, or mentally, the mental preparation is the main thing for me, rather than actually thinking, am I going to ad lib this or ad lib that?
Right. Ad libs are brilliant. I didn't explain my question properly.
That's okay.
What I meant is
Or
if
maybe
you've
I misunderstood it.
maybe this is all being taped. We can go back and find out who was at fault.
Mm, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what I meant was, what steps do you take to make a pre-prepared bit look like it's more off the cuff, if you see what I
Oh,
mean?
I'm with you. Yeah, okay. So the key to it all for me is relaxation. That's it.
Go
just
on,
just
say more, say
just
more
just
on that.
just be relaxed on stage. So because I think a lot of people don't know how to actually relax. And I was lucky. I mean, my wife's a qualified hypnotherapist, but she's Glaswegian, so it didn't quite work. However, I got into, um, I got into hypnosis and self hypnosis. And when you learn to relax your body, it really helps you on stage. For me personally, some people walk up and down like it's a world title fight, and sometimes it is. But whereas when I first started, I'd be nervous for about 3 days. You know yourself, the time to get nervous is about 2 minutes before you go on, and the nerves actually go from your gut to your head as well. So I'm more about trying to. I've watched what because I'm usually on less. So I'm watching what's going on in the room and what's happened, and I'm thinking, well, and particularly when people do a lot of crowd work prior to me, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to speak to them because that's my natural bent, and people are going to want to talk anyway. They always want to play, no matter what I do. And my preparation is just to be nice and relaxed, to clock what's going on in the room, and the more relaxed I am, the better it is. Sometimes, of course, you can be too relaxed, in which case then the delivery is slightly off because I'm too chilled. So I have to remind myself to be very relaxed, but also in the moment and actually in the material and in the ad lib and very much in the room. So that's where the energy comes from. That's my focus. And that's why it's so tiring because it's razor sharp focus for however long you're on stage, because otherwise you're reciting rather than performing. And that's no good.
Really, yes, exactly, exactly right. And it's almost like a kind of character that you assume in order to get like that, isn't it? I find anyway.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, well, yeah, it is. In the same way that anybody going to work, people have a telephone voice, right? It could be, and it's not because they're fake, but that's just you go into a certain mode when you're on the telephone because that's what you need to communicate. You've only got, your voice to communicate with. I mean, obviously, you can do a video call, but on the telephone,
Yep,
you have to have your telephone voice. With
yep.
something like a Zoom meeting, which can be always be quite awkward. This one isn't, by the way, but it could be. But you have to adopt a certain way of communicating. So within the confines of a set, yeah, you have your persona. For me, I know when I'm on. If I was on all the time, it would be tiresome. If I sat here now, you know, I'd like to think you know me well enough. We know each other, right? You're a very outgoing guy, right? So I expect you. I know I know you. So I'm like, oh, it sounds great. Sounds good. If I was like, hey, Sammy boy, you'd be like, all right, mate, calm down. You can put
Yeah.
that on the advert on Instagram, by the way.
All
Ooh,
right.
ooh, 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 Sammy boy. I
I
have never
will.
done that in my entire life, ever.
No, you're right.
No,
You
but
haven't. I know.
so
I
yeah.
know exactly what you mean. I was running a workshop this week for some people at a company, and I was warning them against. They call it the law of familiarity,
Okay.
and that is when your brain gets bored with information that you have shared too many times
Mm.
and you just kind of chuck it away almost. Maybe
Yes.
like the sort of third week of a festival, if you aren't conscious of that and
Yeah, of
you're like
course.
running on fumes,
Yeah.
it's easy to be a bit like that. But you've got to make sure that you're kind of pumping up the tires every time, because that's the bit that people that don't have a clue what you're about to say hear. So
Yes.
for you, and it's funny, this guy put up his hand and said, "Yeah, but isn't that like almost a lie?" And I was like, well, in a funny way, yeah, I suppose it is a tiny bit like a lie, but it's only a white lie. You're just giving the
Mm.
impression when you want to talk about porcupines or something that
Yeah.
it's something that's just popped into your head. And you're like, have you guys ever noticed that thing? Whatever it is, and you
Yeah.
aren't just going, yeah, have you ever noticed that thing about porcupine? Because people don't follow that. There's no energy in that. And your style has got lots of kind of passion and energy and
Mm.
rhythm involved in it.
Yeah.
So would you say that that's something that it's important to, focus on?
Well, yeah, I mean, all I know is I tend to I know when I'm at work because the person said, "Please welcome to the stage, Matt Price," and it's
Yes.
not like, "Oh, I transform, become an amazing artist." I don't mean that. I just mean my work persona is such, and also as well, you can't be everything on stage. Not within 20 minutes or half an hour, even an hour. You can only be X amount of things. So it is a lie, but in that sense. But how so the typical Edinburgh thing of wanting to make people cry at a certain point. All right, yeah, you can do that, but I can genuinely make an audience cry. I don't want to do that. I'm an entertainer. I'd rather not. It doesn't suit me to
Yeah.
do that. But I'm happy to turn up. I'm happy that I'm different off stage to on.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about that. But because then when I do get on stage, I can give everything that I have within whatever that performance requires.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
And then it's done. Leave it all on the stage. Like there's boxers who always say you leave it in the ring. I leave it all on the stage. I give everything I have every time.
Yeah. You do.
I do try. I try very hard. So that at least that way, everybody knows, no, he put in a shift.
Yeah. Defo. Defo.
You know.
Defo. Let's talk about when you're putting together a new bit of material.
Mm.
Say something happens and you say a little prayer of thanks to the gods of comedy, and you think, right, I'm going to talk about that, whatever
Mm.
it is.
Yeah.
You would probably do this subconsciously, so this might not be easy to answer, but is there anything that you think of as a yardstick about what things to put in and leave out in order to get it tight and, comedy club ready?
Well, I mean, I think the best bit of advice I had a long time ago, really, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying it's probably from John Gordillo, who's a great director.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he said to write down or to type as much as you can on a given subject. So I'll give you an example. The bit about Broadmoor that I've been doing for a very long time. I typed
Mm.
8,000 words non-stop, just about everything. And he asked me a number of questions about it, that were, and some of which were quite poignant as well. And I just typed and typed and typed. And then a few months later, he got in contact and he said, listen, here's the patterns of language that you're using, and he said, oh, by the way, you're obsessed with a cannibal. He said, you keep using the word fear and respect interchangeably. So before I do anything, I like to think how I feel about a subject before I can actually do it. Although I've reached a point now where I can just sort of walk out and go, you'll never guess what happened, and then just go for it, because sometimes the energy and knowing your persona can get you through. So it's a mixture of things. I like to know how I feel about something at top level before I can actually turn it into a routine. But I will also walk out sometimes and sandwich nothing in between something that I know works. And then
Mm.
if it doesn't work or it gets a bit of a laugh, I think, oh, actually, I can do that better next time. I'll just get up and walk to the other side of the stage and speak to someone and pretend it never happened. Because over half an hour, nobody really notices. They only notice, oh, yeah, we had a really good time. So,
Yeah.
that's my process. I like to get top level design and think how I feel about it. At the moment, I'm sort of I'm trying to put together a show, if I can, about letting go. Now, I think that's very relatable as a thing. If somebody wrongs you, how do you let go? But the whole arc of it is going to be, about a friend who was actually an enemy who I thought was a friend.
Yeah.
If that
Right.
makes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Do
it
you
does.
see what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
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 or the other
yeah.
way around. Sorry. So a guy I thought was friends with was actually an enemy, whereas a person I thought was an enemy with a small e was actually a friend in reality. And
Yeah,
it's about
right.
how you let go of things. But I'm putting that together, so I know how I feel about it. So now all I have to do is decide, right, where do the individual blocks go and at what point? What's the through point of it? You know, it's going to be a central story that I can then hang the other bits off.
I think people would be fascinated by that. You just hear someone say something funny, and most punters would just be like,
Mm,
"Oh yeah, that was good. Yeah, that was funny. What's next?"
yeah,
Whereas you hear about the amount of work that goes. I mean, 8,000 words is obviously an incredible effort. But after a while, what happens is your brain kind of goes, "Oh, I'm starting to get it now. I
yeah,
understand what we're trying to do.
yeah,
Leave that with me. Here's something that happened yesterday that is much, much quicker
yeah,
than having to do that every time."
yeah.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. All right. Do you find ever your nerves change about material when it's more personal?
It used to, but then you see, here's the thing. The audience, for the most part, just want to be entertained. Forget the Edinburgh Festival; that's a slightly different vibe. But even then, I've poured my heart out and so I've talked about all sorts of deeply personal things, and people will still come up to me after a show, and I'll think, oh, maybe they've had to deal with, someone they care about getting attacked. Maybe someone they love has died, or whatever it is, and they'll nearly always say, "Oh, hi, just wanted to know, are you really from Cornwall?" And I'm like, what? So that's how invested certain audience members are for the most part. They don't care. They want to be entertained. Make me laugh.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but do you not care about my friend dying? Oh, that's fine. But oh, I do love a pasty. So I think to put it into
Yeah.
perspective as well, and
Yeah.
I do think that there's nothing wrong with showing emotion on stage, but what I've learned over the years is that, and I'd love to know what you think of this. It's the tone of voice that you adopt. So, for example,
Mm.
because I think of going, hey, how are you? Hello, nice to meet you. But actually, because you're scared when you first start, because you're full of adrenaline, and because you're talking about Japanese suicide, what you're actually saying is, all right, and that's very different.
Yeah.
Very, very different. So you don't mean it. You think you're
Yeah.
going, hey, how are you? Just like a contestant on the X Factor, who thinks they can sing and they're Mariah, but by the time they get to here, they're
Yeah.
rubbish.
They're not.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think tone is very, very important in how to convey that emotion as well. And actually less is more. Because obviously, if somebody dies, if you go, listen, I'm really gutted, it ripped my heart out, yeah, and I wanted to die. Do you understand me? Look at me. That's very different if you just say, do you know what? I regret not having that beer because that guy was my friend. And then you
Yeah.
move
Right.
on.
Yeah. Right.
Same thing. They both evoke emotion,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
one to me, one suits me more. One, the first one is we'll find the police because I think, he might have something wrong with him, and the other is, you know what? I get that. Bittersweet. I get it. Now make me laugh again.
Well, you're right. And I personally do agree with your analysis of the Edinburgh Fringe crowds compared with other crowds. For people listening to this who haven't been, it's a very kind of arty subsect of the population where people write shows about pretty much any harrowing subject you can
Mm,
think of, death, breaking up with a long-term partner, anything you can think of.
yeah.
And it goes in the comedy listing, but there might, for some of the shows that I've seen, only be like half a dozen bits where you're supposed to laugh in the whole hour. And, they get 5-star reviews,
Yeah.
and some of them get like, TV shows off the back of it and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. But I think if you compared that with your average comedy punter around the country, I'm not totally sure that it would translate from one environment to the other.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Absolutely. Listen, I don't knock it. I know people who, as you do as well, who've done very well out of the Edinburgh Festival, so I don't begrudge them their success either. But I just realized over the years it's not really for me and it's not my thing. And
No.
that's it. There's just different styles, different priorities. And I say good luck to anyone who's ever won an award. I don't begrudge you. I'm just trying to make my way by getting better at being me. And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely right. What did doctors you say? Be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that. Very
And
good.
it's a
Mm.
totally true. So you mentioned about hanging around at the back of the room before you're on. What are the types of things that your brain is looking for? Say it's a venue that you haven't played before. What are you
Okay.
thinking?
Well, I mean, I'm more focused. Okay, so obviously you focus on things like sight lines and whether they can hear you properly. I tend to have a look at the audience and see who's sat where, because even in the dark, you kind of vaguely remember where they are, because it's unlikely an audience are going to get up and swap seats. I've had
Yep.
it happen the other day, actually. It was quite good fun.
Right.
But then I was comparing, and they did it deliberately again in the third section. So I'm like, okay, people are swapping seats again. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was great. So I tend to look at, of course, I look out for who the characters are. I'm not afraid to broach when it's difficult in the room. I won't say where I was, but we're a tough one recently. I literally just walked out. I went, hello, tough crowd, and they laughed straight away because they know, yeah, we're being difficult here. And it's fine because it takes a certain confidence to
Right.
say that. So, and that's why I
Yeah.
like to be in the room. Hello, tough crowd. Right, who wants it? It's fine because and you
Yeah.
stand there and make yourself look a little bit bigger on the stage. And again, it's just a question. I think there's a misconception for anyone listening who loves comedy that we pick on people, and that isn't actually true. I'm looking for the person who I think is most likely to respond.
Yes.
You know, or at least I'll soon drop there. If I speak to someone and they don't want to know, I'm like, that's all right, mate. Listen, I'll move on. I even say to people, because my persona on stage is such, and this is where it gets back to listening, as to, allowing the audience to tell you what you are. I'll say to someone, you're right, mate. And then I'll go, you don't want to play, do you? All right, relax.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
and then I'll move on to the next thing. But that'll get a laugh because they know who I am on stage.
You're exactly right. I always think what you want. Firstly, if anyone says to me, "Oh, I went to a comedy show and the comic spoke to me for ages," I always say, "Well, that's actually a compliment that they
Yeah,
did that." I think when I'm on stage, you're looking for someone in the middle. You don't want someone who, as you say, is just completely shut up, thinking, please, dear God, stop talking to me. But at
yeah,
the same time, you don't always want someone who's too kind of like, Baba, thank
yeah,
goodness this is my chance. You want
absolutely.
somewhere in the middle of those, someone who can play along, they aren't too gobby, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant. We could talk for the rest of this whole night if we want, and I know this is going to be good. So it's
yes.
kind of a compliment, I think, if an act identifies you as a punter of someone who they want to kind of chat with.
Absolutely, but I can't resist the challenge of the nutter in the crowd either. Or equally, I can't resist the challenge of the introvert in the crowd. I spoke with an accountant recently who, by the end of it, stood up and dry humped the air. So on my request, I have to say, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's a question, of not even manipulate, but you get to know people in the crowd. They get to know you and they bond with you, and then they realize, and that gets back to looking like a serious guy. They actually realize quite quickly, oh, actually, no, you're very good at this, mate. You're a good laugh. Carry on,
Mm,
we'll like it.
mm.
And I find a lot of my gigs go from, oh, I'm not quite sure who you are, to, oh no, we like you, and now we all want to join in. And
Yeah,
the
yeah,
audience, the
yeah.
audience always want to play when I'm on stage, nearly
Yeah, they do.
always.
Yeah,
And
they
I don't
do.
mind that. It's fine. It's fun, and it has to mean that you're spinning plates. And obviously, what the aim is to be as entertaining as you possibly can, and then to get back in at the gig again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All this spontaneity. I might be stood in the middle of the crowd sometimes,
Yes.
but yeah,
I've seen you do that.
but it's a calculated risk, though. I'm not going to do it if I think it's going to hurt the gig. And, and I might go to do it and think, no, they're not laughing. Okay, that's fine. So maybe I can abort this now and just pick up my water or something. So I'm constantly watching as I'm going. I think that's the best way. You have to calibrate.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. When you walk out onto a stage, obviously laughter is the main one, but what other things are you kind of looking for to gauge an audience early?
I think I think it depends. If I've been there all night, I'll know where to sort of focus my opening gambit to. I know who can cope with it and who can't. Because I think sometimes, so I just want to get the whole room involved, and the way to do that is just to come out and hit them as quickly as you can with as many jokes as you can.
Yeah.
That's the only way of doing it. There's no more science to it than that. It helps if I've been watching watching what's happening, because sometimes I don't do it very often, but you can come up with a line that references something that's been said, and then it really can. I've made an audience laugh for like a minute before, by reference, like solid minute of laughter, and just by referencing something that's been said before.
And the really funny thing about that is the thing that you say to get the laugh, if you just wrote it down and stuck it up on your
Yeah,
wall and analyzed it,
nothing.
it doesn't actually have to be very funny. But
No,
audiences know he's only said that because earlier on we were talking about a plumber having an affair with a lady he was, whose house he was in.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. And then if the venue have got a spanner, you'd be an idiot not to walk out with a spanner, you know,
Right,
and
right,
just
right.
go, ladies, and then just
Yeah,
put it
yeah,
down. Don't even have to say
yeah.
hello. I'm
And
not
that
saying that would work, but it would work.
no, it would work. And if you just
Yeah,
analyze that as a joke by itself, everyone would be like, "What? What's the point of
yeah,
that?" But it's not. You just need to show that it's something that you've come up with at the time. I know there are comics like Ross Noble or Russ Hicks who
mm,
build their whole sets around gigantic tangents, but
yeah, yeah.
people don't realize all you have to do is step a few steps off the path that you're on, and the place can go nuts, can't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course it can. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It comes back to being in the room and to listening what's been said, but also listening to what's happening as you're going as well. Because like I said, I watch stuff back, and then you're like, oh, okay. Sometimes they don't always take to you immediately. Sometimes it might take four jokes before it really starts to land, and that's okay. They'll laugh, but they're not really in. But then they're in. Then there's a point where they're in. Sometimes that's immediate.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can get 10 feet away from the microphone and get my first laugh, which is great. Sometimes it might take a minute, maybe a minute and a half, but then you can feel the energy rise. Right, you get me now. So it's very easy to give up before you've actually started. And that's something that I
Mm,
wouldn't have known. And also, every joke, you think every joke's going to land. You have this sort of vision in your head of, well, I mean, I wrote that. That's one of my children. Well, no, it's not
mm.
really, is it? It's a joke that you wrote. And it might be that they just don't like whatever it is you're talking about, or they don't get what you're talking about, or you did it too quickly because you were reciting it, or too slowly because you were reciting it, or you had one eye on somebody over there instead.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Are there any methods about being in the moment and not getting too far ahead of yourself? Is there anything that you kind of tell yourself to do with that, or is that just kind of like muscle memory
No,
of all the years?
no, absolutely no. I just remind myself that I really want to be there. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it. Because how else
exactly.
can you do it? They haven't seen you before. They don't know. And also, I mean, my missus made a point to me. We're going to get a bit Edinburgh now. Last year, a friend of mine died, right? And it was a horrible, horrible thing. My cousin phoned him, my cousin Simon. He said, "Look, Simon and Ears died." And I was devastated. As you can imagine, the guy everybody loved, used to skateboard with him back in the day. And I phoned my missus and I was crying my eyes out. And she said to me, "Listen, you have to go to work. You have to go to work now." And I did. And I went out and I
Mm,
nailed it, right? I nailed the
mm,
gig because the audience don't know. And it's not
no.
their fault. So, but then what occurred to me was this, and it's occurred to me prior to that anyway. But the last 2.5 years, I've been traveling a lot, really, hours and hours on public transport. I've
Mm,
done Penzance to the Lake District. So
Jesus.
anyone who says I don't want to be a comedian, that isn't the case at all. Like, but the missus again, the wise oracle that is my missus, said to me, look, she said, when you're in pain, like physical pain, and you're sore, when you're upset, if somebody has died, if you're skint, if you're chasing money, have you traveled for hours, if you haven't had any sleep, and you're hungry, she said, you can still get on stage and deliver. And I'm very proud of that. And that shift made me feel very different about myself. Very different about myself. People used to say to me, and you probably heard them say, why doesn't Matt Price believe in himself? I do believe in myself 100% because I have to. It's not because I think I'm the
Mm.
greatest comedian in the world. I'm the greatest comedian that I can be, and I want to get better, and the best is yet to come. But that dialogue with yourself is very important. It's very simple. You either want to do it or you don't. If you do, give it everything you have. And don't be grateful like, oh, thank you so much for the gig. I'm always grateful for a gig. But get out there and embrace it and give everything you have. And that's one thing I'm going to do. So I remind myself before I go on, yeah, I'm glad to be it. And the audience can pick up on whether you're glad to be there. I'm not some jaded journeyman who's bitter about anything. I just want to be the best that I can possibly be. And I can do it in any circumstances. And you could wake me up in the middle of the night and give me a microphone, and I wouldn't phone the police. Instead, I would go and entertain the audience in front of me. I
Yeah,
guarantee
right.
you.
Yeah, right,
That's
man.
how I view it. I'm not
No,
alone in that, but that's my mindset because it has to be.
it does. It does have to be pros. That's what separates the pros from the amateurs, you know.
Yeah,
It's so easy. You have a good gig in a good mood, bad gig in a bad mood, but the pros have a good gig when they're in a bad mood.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, listen, I was on a gig with somebody, I'm not going to say who it was, who was so nasty to me. I haven't even got the words for it. It's still great now. And we were at another gig and he was shouting and bawling in my face, and you're not a proper comedian. I'm a proper comedian, blah, 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 and I thought it was going to get violent. And we had to spend several days together because we were doing a run of gigs together. But
Of
I
course.
saw him again after 3 years. I saw him a few months ago or whatever. And the promoter said to me, you all right? I said, yeah, I'm all right. I said, I'll be honest with you. I've got a very, very big challenge ahead of me right now. And he looked at me. I said, but it won't affect the gig. And I closed that gig and I did very, very well. And he messaged me afterwards and he thanked me and he said, listen, I mean, I'm just saying, he said that was extraordinary as a performance. And it was actually, to be fair. He
Yeah,
said, but
good.
he said, I have no idea what's going on. He said, but well done for whatever it is you're going through to be able to do that. And I say it to inspire anybody listening. It's like, look, if you're at work, you have to do your job. There's people, I consider this a job and a profession and a
Mm.
lifestyle and everything that I'm very, very proud to do. And people in the army have to go to war. I don't know what, but they're working 24/7. They might have to go to war. People who do all kinds of jobs have to be professional and do their job. And this is a profession. It doesn't seem like it sometimes. I know that. If you're doing a gig in the corner of a pub and someone's walking past you and to get to the toilet, but it's still a job. And professionalism is key, and I'm proud of that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think as a society, we denigrate comedy compared with other art forms.
Yeah.
Like we totally accept that there's Sir Laurence Olivier, Sir John Gielgud, because they
Mm.
are trained actors who have played the Dane. Have you ever thought why we never had Sir Tommy Cooper or Sir Eric Morecambe?
Well, no, not really. I suppose
See,
I
I
don't know.
think I think the kind of inference of that is
Mm.
like, yeah, but you're just messing around. You're just like making people laugh. You're not like Hamlet. And there's a part of me that's like, well, why don't you go and have a bloody go at it if you think it's easy?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest with you, mate. I get that completely, but I'm past that now. I'm past that. It's all one of the things as well. Other comedians listening, and for people to understand this, is the less clutter you have in your head, the easier it is to focus on what you're doing. You know,
Mm,
we're
mm.
in a game that's very, very hard sometimes. I've had
Yeah, it
all sorts
is.
of things. People have said all sorts of things to me prior to a gig, and I'm like, all right, mate, you hold that thought. I said to somebody once, to listen. I said, I'm not going to let you in I wouldn't have you in my house. Why would I let you in my head? So just keep your
Right.
spite to yourself. And that's it. And they sort of think, oh, I didn't expect that from Matt Price. Well, no, but you're getting it from Matt Price because I don't need you to, to undermine me in any way. I'm
No,
at work now. I'm just going to go out and do my thing. And I agree
absolutely.
with you. We don't feel respected sometimes, but that I can't. I have no control over what anyone else is doing. And I'm hoping I'm allowed to quote him, but Russell Kane, right, one of the best acts I've ever seen. Absolutely extraordinary comic. He's a genius. He's brilliant, right? The
Hmm.
setups are exquisite. He said to me, I like to be in control. I focus on the things that I can control rather than the things that I can't. So he's,
Yeah,
so
right.
that's why he'll do his sound check and his lighting and all that. It's not rocket science. Everyone does that. But, he was trying to explain to me his sort of process. And he's right. And so I tend to, if people have a dig, I won't bother with them. It'll hurt me because I'm human, but it's one I can park that because I'm the one about to walk out on stage now and do my allotted time on stage at this gig, not you. Does
Mm.
that make sense? It all
Yeah.
comes back to mindset because it has to be. So I clear all the stuff. It's of no use to me to be dwelling on what anybody said or indeed what anybody might be thinking because you don't
Yeah.
actually know.
No, that's it. And that actually goes back to the Glaswegian guy with his arms folded and a
Mm,
face like a smacked ass for the whole show who comes up after and says how much he liked it.
yeah,
I've done gigs. You see, when I was in my early 20s, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was writing a script with a bloke and he said, yeah, we'll have to meet next week. He said, it'll have to be in the evening. I'm working next week. And I said, oh, yeah, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm teaching. And I said, oh, goodness. I didn't know you had a PGC or whatever the qualification is. And he kind of
yeah.
he scratched the back of his head and said, yeah, I don't actually, Sam.
All right.
And there was this agency who were basically sending people into schools who weren't qualified teachers. It was a bit like that
Mm.
film School of Rock. Have you ever seen that?
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
School of Rock. Yeah.
So I was basically doing that. It was good dough. This is going back 25 years. They were paying like 200 quid a day to do it, and you were done by 3 o'clock to do
Wow. Okay.
gigs. And I spent this school in Peckham that I was at, it was so understaffed, they would advertise for a role and not get a single applicant.
Oh,
Not like someone who's they want to hire, but the
yeah.
inbox would be empty. So if you went in as a supply teacher and you didn't have half a can of supertenant's lager or a half smoked joint in your hand,
Oh,
they would
wow.
say, can you come back tomorrow?
Oh, blimey.
And it was a tough school, and it would basically be if no one threw a chair, it was
Yeah.
considered a successful lesson. Anything on
Wow.
top of that was a bonus. So I got very good there. And what I realized was if you want to deal with the naughty kids, you could spend a 20-minute conversation asking one kid to take his bag off the table.
Yeah.
But I realized that the handful of kids who actually wanted to learn, they would just watch this pantomime go on. So after a while, I got good at like preaching to the choir, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, I get you.
So
Yeah.
I've been in green rooms where a comic has come off stage and they've absolutely killed it. And they'll come off and just go, oh my God, did you see that guy in the orange shirt on the right hand side? He didn't laugh at a single one of those.
Mm.
And I always go, yeah, but the other 123 people were all fell
Yeah.
off their chairs laughing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's something that a lot of comics notice, isn't it?
Of course it is. Absolutely, because we're quite sensitive, highly tuned. But, again, it's something that you have to be able to deal with. I was in a car once coming back from a gig and the person had died on stage. No shame in that. They were new act.
Hmm.
And I said, so what are you going to do when you get home? Well, I'm going to have a cup of tea. I said, well, listen, you want to go up a level as a comedian, drink your tea. I said, by the time you get that much tea left, hopefully the gig's gone. I said, the quicker
Yeah.
you learn to get rid of the gig, the better it is. It's hard. I said, that pain you're feeling right now, that will always be there. We all get disappointed. I get disappointed. I shudder sometimes when it doesn't go well or it doesn't go as well as I would like it to go. But I also have a sense of perspective as well. I've also got the luxury now, I suppose, of experience and stay in power so I can rationalize more and I can go, well, I've said it to people, listen, I have empirical evidence that you're good at this. So why are you worrying about
Mm.
dying tonight or struggling tonight? And everybody else struggled as well. So I do remind myself, nah, most of the time it goes well. And anything between well and really well. And that's what you're
Yeah,
supposed to do.
exactly. Exactly
Occasionally,
right.
occasionally it doesn't. And that's all right. That's just life. We'll have a bad day at work. Everybody does. I'm going to cough, excuse me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to find now I've been going about 15 years. I tend to find that I only really remember the ones that either go really well or really badly, and the rest are just in this kind of big blob in the
Yeah.
middle. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, people laughed. I got paid. Move
Yeah.
on.
Absolutely, yeah, and sometimes the gig has a certain level to it as well. Sometimes that's just their night. We don't always know what if you turn up at a place and you think, oh, it's been all right, but it's not really banging, and afterwards I go, oh yeah, that was really great. Yeah, we really loved that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. I've
so
had that.
and so I'm never quick to sort of, and also I take compliments from people because it takes a lot for someone to pay a compliment in life anyway.
Yeah,
So,
right.
if someone says, I thought that was great, I'll go, oh, thank you very much. Rather than, well, I mean, they didn't laugh at every single joke. Because no, that's not the way to be. The
No,
way to be is like, "Do you know what? They enjoyed it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And thank you. Thank you for enjoying it and keep supporting the night. Genuinely, that's how it has to be. It's very easy to beat yourself up and, from a professional perspective, to sow seeds of doubt in people's minds. If you say to somebody, "Oh, it didn't go as well as I would like," well, first of all, you can sound like a bit of a diva, anyway.
yeah.
And it's like, uh, perspective is always good, but of course, perspective only comes from experience.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So I accept that.
I always think a making a mistake on stage, and quite often, what the reason why comics beat themselves up, I think, is that there's often something different that you could have done that would have
Mm.
changed the outcome of the gig. But I always think the mistake isn't making a mistake. The mistake isn't learning from the mistake you made.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah,
That's the error, and that's often how you learn. You can
yeah,
sometimes go 10, 20, 40 gigs in a row that all go well. It's when it goes wrong, you're like, right, what just happened
yeah.
there?
Of course, but that's why I tend to listen back to things because I listen back and I can go, right, yeah, now I know why that went wrong,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can
or I know
you,
why I struggled.
Matt, you're a brilliant comedian, Matt, but could you talk us through a couple of the mistakes that you've made on stage in your career and what you consequently learnt from them?
Yeah, okay. So there was one, I won't say where the gig was. In fact, the gig doesn't exist anymore now. I was comparing, and there were a group of women down the front, and I said, look, I'm going to ask you to be quiet if that's okay, before I bring the headliner on. And this woman said, I'll be quiet when someone good looking is on stage.
Oh,
And I went berserk. I wasn't, oh no, I want to make it clear. I wasn't misogynistic because I'm not a misogynist, but
no.
I was going, oh, really? I mean, look at the state of you compared to your friends, and all that.
She was
I'm
the
going,
one that brought
yeah,
up physical appearance.
you're
Not
sat there in order of height, like the ascent of woman. I said, oh, and so I get two laughs. And long story short, I get to about 10-0. And I go, that's 10-0 to me. You hear that rapturous applause? That's for me. Anyway, shut the fuck up. And now, if that happened, I would go, well, you're lucky because this next act is Sam Carrington. He's a very attractive man. It was only because all those years ago I was very, very self-conscious. But that's a very
yeah.
hard lesson to learn in public, and I just
Mm.
would, and people, I was at Just a Tonic recently, and a bloke, it went well actually, but in Leicester, and a guy said to me, "God, you really are an ugly bloke, aren't you?" And I said, mate, I said, this is a gift. I said, this is an absolute gift. I
Mm,
said, I'm of no threat
mm,
to you whatsoever. I said, also, I'm funnier than you unless you would like to take over. And they handed him the mic and they all just laughed and went, there you go. I'll do me and
uh,
you do you. I said, looking like you
uh,
probably do you. You know, so I overreacted to that. And that is a lesson to learn. It's one of those things. Sometimes I think the time when I have sort of struggled is when I forget to be present and I forget how much I love doing it. So, it can be a little bit monotone. Like it's that thing of not actually listening to the tone in your head. So, so
mm,
as I said, it gets back to, and it can just seem, I think it's a very serious, miserable looking guy being serious and miserable. I don't quite understand what this is. But then of course you can turn it because you can flick the switch. But for me, I like the switch to be flicked immediately.
yeah.
Because because you need to, because you're in performance mode. It is a performance. You're meant to be there. You're not being fake. You're just doing the version of you that does the best that you can possibly do on stage. But there's always a reason for struggling. There's always a reason for dying. I take responsibility for it. Very occasionally, you get an audience, as you know, who doesn't really want to be there. That's fine. They're not really
Mm,
into comedy. It's
yeah.
not really their thing, and that's absolutely fine. It's absolutely fine by me. That but it gets back to being professional again. You have to just sort of you batten down the hatches and you do the best you can and you get through it. But yeah, I'm trying to think of another example actually of
No,
where I've
no, that's
struggled.
a
But
that's a
you know,
that's a good one. I once did a gig in Essex, and by the side of the stage was a big poster for a New Year's Eve party that was coming up, featuring the 90s garage duo DJ Luck and MC Neat.
wow,
And I went on stage and said something like, "Oh, yeah, here we go. If they haven't done all of the hits in the main part of the performance, with a little bit of luck, there'll be an encore."
oh that's very yeah,
And it quickly became apparent I was the only person in the room that did not have tickets to that party. And they all decided that they hated me as some flash Harry come down from London. And after that, I started every gig by saying, "Ah, it's my pleasure to be here in Basildon," or
yeah, that's
wherever
nice, yeah,
ever it was. And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
okay, taking the piss out of a room when you turn up, when you start a gig, that's risky because there might be a room of people just kind of going, "Well, we like it here, mate. This is our Saturday night out. What are you taking the piss out of it for?" But if you show a bit of like vulnerability, or you have jokes where you're the butt of the joke
yeah,
and they like you, 5 or 10 minutes into the set, then you go into the bit about DJ Luck and MC Neat, and they've made
yeah,
up their mind that they like you. So you're
yeah.
always kind of like, going over. Have you ever thought about vulnerability? Like, what role does vulnerability play in what you do?
I'm a vulnerable man anyway. There's part of me that is, I just am. So it's
Hmm.
it's not it's not difficult. It's how to rein it in appropriately, how to pitch it at the right level. I think that you need to be able to perform comedy in about the same bit in about six different ways. I can sit down on a stool and I can do it, sort of almost whispering it into the microphone to get their attention. Or I
Mm,
can do it, without a microphone, shouting at the top of my voice, and you still make the audience laugh. And in terms of vulnerability, I think you can overdo it. What I don't want is sympathy. And I think, so, yeah, it can easily become self-pity and sympathy. But on the other hand, or look like you want sympathy, but on the other hand, if you're aware enough, you can manipulate that as well.
yeah.
I've reached the point where so for example, I can be doing something and I'll say to an audience, look, it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. And right now, I don't know what I'm doing, but let's investigate. And I will
Yeah.
say that to an audience, and they're fine
Yeah.
because that's vulnerability.
Yeah, it
But
is.
but they're almost I'm putting them into my shoes so they know where it is I'm coming from. And
Yeah.
sometimes someone will say something really hurtful, usually appearance based, and the audience will go, oh, and and I'll go, Okay, well, we have a number of options now to explore, don't we, really? And
Mm.
another 25 minutes in which to do it. That's vulnerability, but it's also a status play. So I know how to flip the status as I'm going as well. So, I'm a mixture of high status and low status. And vulnerability is low status, but it's also high status if you flip it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because what's more high status than making an audience feel a certain way? Making an audience go, oh, is actually, oh, you want pity, do you? No, I don't, because I've got a joke exactly after they've gone, oh, I've got a joke to go with it. So I've gone low status to bang, high status because I've made you laugh now.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
so it
yeah.
do, it does play a role. I'm very conscious, that actually the job is to make people laugh as much as possible. That my persona on stage means that I can ramble a little bit, but I'm aiming to be as tight as possible as well. Making it
Yeah,
look spontaneous, but as many laughs as I can possibly get. So I walk out there onto the stage like someone has stolen something from me and try to get a laugh immediately and then do another one and another one. I'm aiming for about 6 laughs in the first minute if I can get it. And I
brilliant.
can get it. I can get it. It's
Yeah,
not, there's loads of people who can do it. It's not just me, but that's what I'm aiming for, vulnerable or not.
yeah, definitely, definitely. It's kind of like an ingredient that you can cook with, but you don't want too much of it. You don't want to
Yeah.
be emptying the whole jar out into whatever you're cooking, do
Yes.
you? You
Yes, like
just want
cloves.
exactly, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I use a little pinch of cloves, like literally a tiny little pinch of cloves. You put anything else, it's too overpowering.
Exactly. Exactly that. I can remember years ago gigging with a comic called Anti-During Battalion.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
You remember him?
Yes.
His act was he'd walk out on stage and he'd pretend it was his first ever gig.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
remember that.
he'd walk out and go, it's my first ever gig, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really nervous, really, really nervous. Just done a course, and I've written down a few little tips that I'm going to use to help me get through this. Okay, here we go. And he pull out a piece of paper and go, tip number one, don't let them know you're nervous. Shit.
Oh,
Shit.
great, Joe. Yeah, great start. Brilliant.
Well,
Yeah.
well, well, the the funny thing was all of the comics thought that. The comics would all be watching from the back of the room, doubled over laughing. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I did a few gigs with him where it was so believable that the people in the room didn't know that it wasn't his first ever
Yeah. Yeah.
gig.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can
and
understand that. Yeah.
and that potentially is kind of over egging the vulnerability thing. You
Yes.
could
I agree.
reference it, but then you've got to now take control of the plane again and
Very
fly
much
off to
so.
the next bit.
Oh,
but
yeah.
oh yeah, I mean, my God, I still laugh thinking about that guy and his sets. He was too authentic and vulnerable. Matt, you've mentioned a few times about listening back to gigs when you've done. How do you do that? Do you tape them audioly? That's a difficult word to say, isn't it? Do you just tape the audio with a voice recorder? Do you set up a little
Yeah.
tripod
No,
and do what?
I listen to the audio because I know what I look like,
Hmm.
so I don't need to, I don't have any sort of pre-rehearsed gestures, for example. So I know roughly so I like to listen back because because it helps me sort of really get into the material. I don't have to worry about looking at myself. Not that I care. I've got plenty of clips up online and all that, but
Hmm.
I tend to listen back to the audio on the way back from the gig. I'm fresh after the gig and you got the adrenaline and you sit still and I listen back because why not? It's only half an hour of my life.
And what are you listening for? Have you got some kind of checklist that you would go through?
No, not really. Just to check that it was as good or as bad as I thought it was, and sometimes you might think, oh, I ad-libbed that, so I might, see what I can do with that again. If it's a new bit, you think, actually, yeah, I now know how I'm going to perform that because it takes a while to get stuff to work
Yeah.
as well, like to properly land,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
and then I do it in different orders as well, and and tighten it, and I'm working on new stuff at the moment, and because the plan is to drop a lot of the stuff I've been doing for a while, but no bad reason, just because I want to move on as a comedian,
Yeah, good. Good
and
for you.
so
Yeah.
I listen back, I'm hoping to have what I would say is a new set, by certainly by the autumn.
Great.
October onwards, I'll be have a different 20 with a bit of luck.
Yeah.
Not luck,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I'll do
Exactly.
it.
Bit of luck, but more hard work, I
But it does
would.
help. It helps. You have to reflect upon what you do, because
Yeah.
how else are you going to improve?
I often tell groups that the after section of performing, it's probably the smallest, but it's
Mm,
also the most overlooked.
yeah,
It's the most. Oh, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. That's a phone that I've just shut
that's
up.
all right.
We're
No,
we'll
no.
let we'll let crack on. It's often
Yeah,
the most overlooked part of speaking, where lots of people that don't like it, if you don't enjoy speaking, you just think to yourself, "Thank God that's done."
yeah, yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
need to think about that anymore for the rest of my life. And if you've just given the last piece of speaking that you have ever done, then that's
Mm,
fine. But in reality, most people haven't. Most people will have to do it again.
yeah,
But then you've kind of slid down a big long snake on the board and you're starting maybe from lesser than what you were before, but just committing.
yeah,
It's so obvious when you hear something back. Oh, where's the energy? Oh, I could have started better there.
yeah,
Whatever it is, that it's difficult to analyze
yeah.
in real time, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Absolutely. Yeah, yes, it is. And and I always say to people as well, because some people, comics will say, "Oh, I don't like the sound of my own voice," and I say to them, "Well, so how old are you? Well, I'm 30. Are you in a relationship? Yeah. Well, you get on with your parents? Yeah. You got a day job? Yeah, I have. I work in a bank." And I go, "Wow, you've been on holiday? Yeah, I have. Got friends? Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I say, "You managed to do all those things in spite of your ridiculous voice." You know. So have a
Brilliant.
listen back. Do yourself a favor and listen back to it. Listen back to yourself. It's not the end of the world. All right, you sound different to how you think you do, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's all right. But everyone just knows it as you, and
No,
no one's actually going, look at Sam Carrington, this stupid voice coming
no,
out of his stupid face. I mean, there might
exactly.
be, haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate, dude. Exactly. Sodom. And yeah, I completely agree with you. There's a physiological reason for that. We listen to our own voice through our inner ear, but when you hear a recording, it's the first time it's coming through your outer ear into your inner ear, and it sounds different. And you go, "Oh, I don't sound like that, do I?" But sod it. You get over that pretty quickly, don't you?
Yeah, very quickly. Of course you do. Absolutely, you do.
You mentioned earlier about getting a tip from Russell Kane. Can you think of any other little kind of nuggets of wisdom that you've picked up over the years from other comics that you've thought, oh yeah, I'm going to think about that.
I think that I always say I've got my own nuggets. Basically, I formulate my own nuggets, man. I would
Yeah,
say, I would say that audiences assume that we know what we're doing, and they do,
yeah,
and for the most part we do, but sometimes we're winging it, aren't we?
yeah,
I would say it to people, look, they just assume. I get that you're nervous. You're about to walk out in front of a room full of people and command their attention and try and make them laugh, but they assume that you're capable of doing it. So just relax and get out there and do it. You
yeah,
know.
brilliant.
because
Yeah,
because because
brilliant.
because it's very easy to think otherwise, that they expect us to be good, they want us to be good, and I think that it takes a lot more energy for an audience to dislike you than to like you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, nice. Absolutely. Tell me, Matt, what has comedy taught you about life that has nothing to do with being funny?
Oh, that's quite an interesting one. It's taught me resilience, definitely. It's definitely taught me how to be resilient. That moment where I realized, oh, I can actually do this, no matter what, in what circumstances. That's what it's taught me,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, man. We're wired up to want to be negative,
Yeah.
and it's
Strength
about
of character. It's given me strength of character. It's made me who I am, and I'm not ashamed of who I am. I have nothing to apologize for anybody, anyhow, anytime, because yeah, it's very easy to. I've grown. I've evolved as a human being through comedy
yeah, right. I
because it's made me realize that I can push myself further than I ever thought possible.
yeah, right.
And I,
So often our limits are what we impose on ourselves as people, aren't they?
well, yeah, not so. Like when I was a younger man, I had always thought I had a lot of heart and a lot of desire, and I would try really hard at everything I ever did, and really went for it. And then when you get to middle age, I did wonder at a certain point, do I have that heart anymore? Yep. 100% more, probably more heart. My heart's bigger than my body, but I've
Mm,
got the intelligence and the wisdom to be able to temper it. And that's great. And that as a man, it's made me realize, yeah, okay, I'm a heart. I'm always going to be heart, heartfelt, but I'm in control of my emotions. I've controlled aggression and focus. And it's a very,
mm,
very powerful thing, and it's not over, so I'm really glad nothing's over. I'm excited about the future. But when it's that thing. I think whatever I did in life, I'd always find it hard. I found life hard. I had a terrible start in life, that's fine, you
mhm.
know, but I've managed to evolve and get better, and I'm proud of who I am now, you know. So I think comedy, of course, when you talk about yourself and about your life in a way that the audience can relate to and accept, there is a certain learning process as well. You're processing some of the things that have happened and how
Yeah,
you react
sure.
to them. And you want to be able to articulate how you feel about things. And a little example, with my special, I dedicate it to my friend from last year, and I wasn't sure how to do it. Do I do it at the start? Do I talk about him on stage, which I have done because he was a very funny guy? But right at the end, after it's been quite a lovely sort of moment, really, between me and the guy I've got on stage, it just very gently shows my friend and his dates and him on a skateboard in his prime. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because I've learned how to articulate myself through comedy. That's the one thing it's taught me because it's so introspective and so intense that you kind of think, you're asking yourself all the time, how do I really feel about this? And how can I make it so the audience will care or suspend their disbelief?
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And you're so right, man. You are in your prime. I mean, telly now is being like, superseded and changed with all the other media that's around. But I do think, back at a time when telly was a much bigger part of people's lives, there was a real habit of TV executives to get like, fresh-faced kids on there who look good on posters and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
their life experience, it's like a gnat's fart in the wind. I personally think comics only really, it's when you've been round the block a few times and you've been punched in the face or you've had your heart broken or
Hmm.
whatever you've done,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like they're like scars, aren't they? But they're what make you moving forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, comics only, I reckon your best years are all still ahead of you, mate. And you're already a brilliant comic.
Oh, yeah. I'm getting better. Trust me.
Yeah,
100%.
right. Yeah, right. What have comics learned about human connection that applies to elsewhere in life?
I would say that it's easy to assume what people are, isn't it? Really, I think we all do it to a certain extent.
Of
I
course we
think,
do.
I think for me, I've seen through comedy, on and off stage, I've seen the best and worst of people, and that's it. It makes me open-minded. We're lucky because as comics, we speak the same language, don't we? So it doesn't matter who you
Mm,
are, where you're from, what you look like.
mm.
We have that thing. You turn up at a gig and you chat. I was like, oh, what are they like? Is it cash?
Yeah.
Have we done this one
Yeah.
before? What are they like? We're going to get rebooked and blah 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 and all that. Is there a character in the room? But in terms of understanding people, it's helped. Yeah, it's helped me to see, like I said, the best and the worst.
Yeah, defo. Matt, what a brilliant episode this has been, mate. I can't thank you enough for
That's
your
all right.
time. Just
Thank you.
before I let you go, Matt, for any of the uninitiated who might have enjoyed this conversation, what is the best way for people to find out more about you, see some stuff you've done already, see where you're going to be on in the future? How can people do that?
I have one request. Just go to YouTube and type in Held at PowerPoint comedy special. That's it. That's all I want people to see. It's not just about me. It's bigger than me. It's about my friend, or at least it's for my friend.
Yeah, I've watched it and it's brilliant. It is well worth people's time. And
Yeah.
also find out if Matt Price is coming to a town near you, because I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Matt, thank you so much for this, buddy. And
Right.
I genuinely hope our paths cross in real life very soon.
Well, I would hope so. Otherwise, it'd be a very shallow conversation we just had.
So there he was, the brilliant Mr. Matt Price. I think there was loads to get stuck into in that chat. Here are a few of my takeaways. Number one, try not to second guess what you think audiences are thinking. You might think you know, but more often than you think, you'll be totally wrong. Secondly, comparing your stage persona to a telephone voice, I think is a really good way to think of it. I thought that was brilliant from Matt. Think of it like an actor getting into character. Lastly, I thought the chat we had about showing vulnerability while still being in control was really interesting. Some people think control equals dominance, but they're wrong. It is perfectly possible to show vulnerability and still be in control. And if you get it right, it is like gold dust. That, of course, is why self-deprecating jokes work so well. Thanks for listening to Before, During, After, a Smirk Experience podcast about performance from the inside. If you've enjoyed it, then why not share it with someone else who you think might get it? And give us a follow while you're at it. See you next time.